Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I would be remiss if I did not recognize my colleagues in government. There's no quicker way to get yourself in trouble as an elected official than by forgetting a city councilor. And there are a lot of city councilors. So I have Raina Getz from Ward 5. I have former city councilor John Rice and my current chief community services officer from Ward 5, Julie Irish, Brittany Yung-Chan, all from Ward 5. Let me see, I've got Susan Albright from Ward 2, Randy Block from Ward 4, Julia Maliki from Ward 3, Tariq Lucas from Ward 2, Sean Roach from Ward 6, and Ben Schlesinger, Ward 5 school committee member, and Stephen Farrell, last but not least, but he's Ward 8, so I can do him last, and Alicia Peterloo, Ward 7 school committee member and chair of the school committee. Who did I forget?
No, you did see
I did, Ben.
Oh, sorry.
I've been doing this for a while. I don't know how to introduce the councilors. Look, what I'd like to do, and there's President of the City Council, John Oliver, just walked in. What I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to keep that really short. I'm assuming that many of you know who I am from the campaign. I then want to talk a little bit about what our three major objectives are as we get going with the administration and where we stand on those. I'm going to let the three Ward 5 councilors, if they want, say a quick word or two, and then we're going to really turn it over for questions. This is a wonderful opportunity for me and my team to learn about what your concerns are, and I'm going to urge you to be very candid with your questions, and I will do my best to give you a clear, unfiltered, honest answers, because I think that's what I owe you as your mayor, is direct communication. Even if it's something you may not exactly want to hear, I think it's really important that I'm very clear on any issue that you're concerned about. So a little bit of background. I grew up here in Newton. I went to Cabot and Bigelow and Newton North, as did my younger brother and sister. I spent 4 summers working for the Parks and Recreation Department as a playground leader. I worked at the old Pewter Pot restaurant in Newtonville. I even had a paper route when I was a kid. And 35 years ago, my wife and I moved back to Newton. We're in the same house ever since on Fillmore Road. 3 kids, 35. He's engaged, getting married. Finally, we really like his fiance. 32-year-old who's married to his high school sweetheart from Newton North. And the single best thing he's ever done is produce our only grandchild, who's now 16 months old. That is amazing. And we have our bonus baby, who's 21 and junior at the University of Michigan. All my kids went through Ward, Bigelow, and Newton North. I served for 8 years in the school committee, term limited out, 14 years in the city council, including as president. And I resigned from my day job on December 31st. I was a lawyer. I'd helped found a law firm in Boston to become the next mayor. This is by far the best job that I have ever had. I can't say it enough, and the reason it's such a good job is I have really terrific people on my team. Jacqueline, where are you? Over there, our executive aide. Ellen Ishkanian, who's our communications director, Dana Hanson, our chief of staff, John Rice, our chief community services officer. They are unbelievably talented. This is a team of grown-ups. All of us are veterans of the city. We know the city inside and out. We've been in city government before. And I am also finding, as I'm meeting more and more city employees, that we really do have dedicated city employees who work for the city. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, because I think that's really important for what we do. So let me just tell you briefly what my 3 primary objectives are as I've taken office. Number 1 is the schools. I have committed throughout my campaign in day 1 that I would be a strong supporter of the public schools. I am. I just met with the superintendent and the leadership of the school committee this evening. We're going to have some difficult discussions. Money No secret is always very tough. There's a finite amount of money out there. We're never, ever, ever going to find enough money to do every possible thing that I know our superintendent could do with unlimited funds. And that's true of every single thing we do. But what we are doing, and we're working very hard to do, is come up with a sustainable multi-year plan for funding our schools. We are actively looking at ways we can increase funding from the city side to help support the work that our schools are doing. I think Superintendent Nolan is outstanding, and I have to say that the school committee, although virtually everyone is brand new, Alicia is the #2 veteran at all of, 8 months in. This is an excellent school committee. I'm very pleased to be working with these folks, and we're going to try. We're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen, but we're committed to doing that. So schools are my #1 priority in the city. #2 is outstanding customer service, and I feel it's critical that we in City Hall are responsive to our residents. So, for example, we are trying to institute and will institute a 24-hour policy. You phone us, you email us, you get a response, and not just, thanks, we got your message, but a real response. Now, obviously, if someone's out on vacation or sick, there's going to be extenuating circumstances, but the goal is we get back to you, and then we try to solve the problem. So, how are we going to deliver better customer service? There's really 2 ways that we're going to do that. One is we are actively working on creating a brand new city website. We've convened the team to do that. We're giving ourselves to the end of this calendar year to get it up and running effectively. I think that's going to be a very powerful vehicle for residents throughout the city to be able to interact with city government. #2, we are determined to give our employees the tools they need to do their jobs well, and that falls into 2 categories. One is information technology. I will tell you that in the past, there have been times when we've been afraid to spend money on technology because it's an extra $10,000 or $15,000 for a department. And what I've said is, we're going to change things completely. Because if you can deliver technology solutions that may cost a little money, in the long run, you're going to save money, and you're going to automate processes that may be getting done by hand or an Excel spreadsheet. Nobody likes that in this day and age. There's no reason we can't be automating as much as possible, and thereby freeing up our city workers to do better customer service and also to take on kind of the more thoughtful, high-level jobs that we want them to do. I don't want a planning department employee, for example, spending hours and hours and hours drafting meeting minutes. I want that planning employee thinking really carefully about a potential zoning change. That's a difference in mindset, and we're going to do that, and we're doing that now. And the third piece is building community. John Rice in particular has been instrumental in breaking down barriers within city departments so that rather than competing with each other to do a particular program, we're working together to provide the best possible programming we can. I am determined to build community in this city, and that has a variety of different aspects. It's a recently approved arts and culture department. It's making sure we get people out of their houses. It's breaking, I think, a cycle of loneliness that exists elsewhere in the country, but here as well. It's getting kids off their screens as much as possible. And if we do all those things, when we have political differences, and we will on an issue, if people have been able to gather together in a positive, fun community event, they're more likely to treat one another better. So it is really important to me that we build this community. We are doing that now. Those are our 3 initiatives, and I'm very proud of the progress we've made to date, and I'll look forward to your feedback, not only this evening, but in the coming months and years to see how we're doing, because our job, as I remind everyone every single day, is we work for you. So with that, do my Ward 5 colleagues want to say anything?
Just to commend you. And I'm very excited to be working with you, and I'm so glad that many of our fellow city councilors are here tonight. I think that's wonderful. I think that's incredible. But our job is to listen and to advocate for our residents. So I am so appreciative of you making those comments, but I also say we're here. We're absolutely here.
Yeah.
You don't,
Sorry.
you don't have to say anything, although I've never met a city councilor who doesn't want to say at least something.
Well, welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. And just wanted to echo what Councilor Getz said. It's really great about creating a space to hear directly from residents. I think that's really such an important part of local government, and it's really valuable. And I think doing this is, taking the time to come out, hosting these listening sessions all around the city, and coming out to the neighborhoods is really important. And thank you for doing that. And yeah, we do want to continue to hear from you, because that really will guide the work that we do on City Council. So reach out and continue telling us your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Charm. I'm one of the new Ward 5 councilors. So I just wanted to introduce myself to you. I live on the Zervis side, so sorry, I'm in foreign territory here. But just wanted to really reiterate that we are here for you. You can find all of our contact information on the Newton website. It may take a little searching, but you'll get there.
We'll improve that.
And also just wanted to point out that the three of us sit across the 6 main committees of City Council. So between the 3 of us, we are able to keep tabs on all the different things that are moving through. And so if you have any questions about anything that's on the docket or that you're seeing in the news, feel free to reach out to us. And I think one of us will be able to speak in more depth, and we're always here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. And I'll just emphasize, it's a partnership with both the school committee and the city council. I've served on both bodies. I know what it's like to be in their shoes. The city council and the school committee play a vitally important role in city government. And we are determined to continue to work collaboratively and closely with all members of both bodies. So with that, I'm opening it up to questions, and I hope you're here to ask. So please, raise your hand. Go right ahead.
Thank you for coming. I want to start by commending DPW and your administration for the great job that you guys did cleaning up the snow. It's a massive storm. Without roads, we cannot go to school. And that shows the interconnectedness between the services. The corollary is also true. Without good schools, we couldn't have other amenities, because there are plenty of towns with crappy schools, from Florida to Texas. It's hard for us to take you at your word when you say that schools are your top priority, because previous administrations have said so, and we have suffered year after year underfunding, financial crises, etc. It seems to me that what we have in this town is a generation that didn't invest in our schools, didn't pay for pension liabilities, and we have to shoulder that responsibility. So I want to have more concrete answers, whether you're going to pursue an override and how.
So the question, first of all, thank you for your comments about DPW's work. This was a very difficult storm. We did a good job. We can do better. One of the things that our administration is committed to doing is every time we have a major event like that, we're going to step back and say, okay, what worked well and what didn't work well, and strive to improve. But I appreciate the feedback. Let me address the school issue up front. We are not going to go out for an override this year. Okay, we're probably not going to go out for an override next year, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going out for an override for anything unless I'm ready to win. Because the worst thing we can do in this community is to ask for money, fail, and have the voters never trust us again. So what are the ingredients for a successful override? Okay? Successful override, first and foremost, is We need in city government to demonstrate that we have spent the residents' money wisely. And that's going to take this administration at least a couple of cycles to demonstrate to the public that yes, we are spending finite tax dollars wisely. Second, we have to persuade the voters, and I understand for school parents it's really easy. If I'm a school parent, I'm asked to pay more money for the public schools, I almost certainly will say yes. But most of our voters are not parents of public school students. The vast majority are not. And that's a challenge, because that means we've got to persuade people whose kids or grandchildren are not in the public schools that they should raise their taxes. So we have to have a compelling argument as to what we are going to do better, both on the city side and on the school side, with any additional revenues from a general override. We are highly likely, I think, to need to go out for debt exclusion overrides probably within the next 3 years or so. Obviously, timing matters. You got to look at what the economy's like. You got to look at other factors. But I'll tell you what we're going to have to be doing. Police station is in abysmal condition. It's a major project. We have got to do that for the safety and well-being of our officers, just like we did fire headquarters and Station 3 a number of years ago. We are going to have to do the Ward / Underwood schools. Whether we do 1 or 2 remains to be seen, although we're looking at that very carefully. But those are literally 100-year-old schools. Though we will be doing one of those schools soon. And then we have to look at the south side of the city, whether it's Brown or Newton South improvements, not quite sure where that's going to play out, but that is important. Why does that matter from a budgeting perspective and a school money perspective? Look, if we don't have to put $2 million in every year to kind of beef up police headquarters because it's in really bad shape and you got to kind of plug the proverbial leaks, you get $2 million more that you can allocate towards other things, such as the school budget. So it's actually really important that we fund significant capital improvements outside of the operating budget, so that we're not taking finite resources and using them to pay for debt for a school project or a police station, for example. That's piece number 1. You asked about the pension. We are, as we speak, actively looking at ways to smooth out our pension obligations. We do not have a finite answer yet. It can involve a number of things. It might be a pension bond, where the city issues a bond over a longer period of time than we have to currently pay. It might be negotiating with the retirement board to see if we can extend the deadline for when we have to fully fund our pensions, and maybe some combination of the two. But I will assure you, we are going to tackle that, and we are going to tackle that in the near term, because we cannot be on a trajectory which says we're paying off our pension obligation by 2032 and ever increasing it year after year. Right now, and in the next 4 or 5 years, that creates a tremendous budgetary pressure for us. But, and I need to be clear about this, even if we fix that problem, that's not going to be a complete panacea. It will help, but it's not everything. One other thing that we are doing is we are looking at our budgeting process more carefully. We still need to be very prudent fiscally, very important that we are, but can we budget perhaps a little bit more, a little less conservatively, I'd say. That would free up more money for operating expenses rather than one-time cash, and those funds in turn could be used for the schools and city services. So we have a bunch of strategies in play right now. We're going to do our best. You're going to have to trust me. I know that's hard for some folks, but I believe that I have a demonstrated track record of service in the city, lived experience in the city, both as someone who's a product of the schools and a consumer of the schools, that they are and will remain my #1 priority. Next question, yes. Do you want them, do we give the microphone, is that helpful? Sure.
Since we know your name, my name is Stephen Gubb. I'm at 34 Evelyn Road. The gentleman mentioned money and potential for an override, which leads me into a couple of things. Several years ago, the traffic department of the city of Newton took Parker Street and Center Street and made one lane, and that was a mistake. And after spending a significant amount of money, it got repaired. In the fall, the traffic department again, under the guise of traffic calming, affected the intersection of Fuller Street and Palm Ave by the fire station. And they made it much more difficult to make the right turn, and after the storm we just had, the right turn lane is now gone, and unless people know about it and know how to merge, it's a problem. It was almost a problem for me a couple of nights ago because I almost had an accident because of that. I don't call that traffic calming. Specifically, I'm here to talk about the parking lot in the center of Newton. If I was a business owner in Newton Center, I'd be very upset. Parking in Newton Center has always been difficult. It's more so now that 20 spaces have been eliminated. Certainly if you go there and it's busy, Friday, noontime, 1 o'clock, try to find a parking space. And where are you going to go? There's really no place to go. You're stuck and you're going to drive around a bit. That doesn't help the businesses there. And the businesses there are important. Walgreens has been vacant now for 3 years, 4 years, and what is the tax loss because of that? Very unfortunate. My question to you, Mr. Mayor, is there's a city green on the other side of the hedge of the parking lot, which is significant. Across Langley, there's another city green. Why would 20, and I wasn't part of any discussion, I'm guilty. Why were 20 spaces badly needed by the businesses in the center removed to build wooden structures and put up concrete barriers? I don't understand that. Now, money is at a premium. If Palm Ave and Fuller Street has to be fixed, and I understand there was a discussion about that last week, oh, there's a couple $100,000 that's gone. Parker Street and Center Street had to be fixed. That was probably $500,000 that's gone. What is that worth to our schools? Okay?
Let me try to answer.
It's all yours.
I'll try to answer that. So look, I'll start by saying that you always try to learn from your mistakes, okay? I think the intersection in Fuller was a mistake, and I'll tell you why. Theoretically, may have made a lot of sense, but what we didn't do is we didn't have our team, and this was before I became mayor, obviously, we didn't have our team go out to the people who are actually living there, who are affected by what we are doing, and saying, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. What is your view of that? Because after all, these are the folks who actually drive there day in and day out. I think if we had done that, we would have done some things very differently. So that's a learned experience for us, and we have made it very clear to our traffic engineers, planners, and DPW folks that we expect them to have the conversations before they initiate any ideas like that. Why? Because things can be great in a textbook, they can be great in theory, but when you put it into practice, the circumstances on the ground can be different. So you might as well do it right the first time, talk to your residents the first time, get their input the first time, and then you do the work. And I think you're never going to get it perfect, but you're going to do a heck of a lot better on that. So let me talk about the green. Bluntly, the city council had no say in the installation of the plaza, okay? Personally, I think the concept of a plaza is wonderful, and the fact that it costs so much money to install and was put in a parking lot rather than other alternatives, I think was very unfortunate. So the green area is controlled by the Parks and Recreation Commission. It's not land that the city can just say, we're going to move it from the parking lot and put it over in the green. So we are going to be working with the Parks and Recreation Commission to explore whether it's feasible and appropriate to move the infrastructure in the parking lot onto the green. Obviously, there's multiple considerations there, including handicapped accessibility. You want to make sure you're not causing any harm to the grass area there. My guess is that it is viable, that you could do that. But again, you do much better, I think, when you actually work with the folks who are in charge of the land, in this case, Parks and Recreation Commission, rather than trying to just dictate something. So I'm going to urge you to give us a little bit of time to work on that. John Rice and Josh Morris are both actively involved in that process, and I am confident that we're going to get a better solution. Whether the city council votes or doesn't vote on the pending item that's before it regarding the extension of the parking trial, I'm going to leave that to the city council. That's not my job, that's the council's job. It's also a pending item in the city council right now, so I would not want to hear any councilors discuss that because it's something they are going to be voting on. But rest assured, we're also not going to repeat that, okay? Before we put out any kind of project like that in the future, we are going to talk to the business owners. We're going to go to the business owners and say, this is what we think we're going to do, rather than this is what we're going to do. And that's a very different mindset. And our mindset is to get the input before we act, because that's frankly how you shape far better projects. Or maybe don't do something at all, or maybe you do it. Because if your business owners say, boy, this is great, we're not worried about the parking, we think it'll be okay, that's an important factor to consider too. So I don't want people walking away saying, well, you're going to get public input, therefore you're not going to do anything. Quite the contrary, you still can act, but you act in a much better, more thoughtful fashion. Questions, lots of questions. Can you speak to them and maybe it's easier.
So those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa Brown. I'm the Newton Dems Ward 5 chair, so if you're interested in getting more involved with the Newton Dems, please see me afterwards. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. My question for you, not surprisingly for those of you who know how involved I am about trees, is about the Climate Action Plan. The draft that got put out and is still listed as a draft isn't very actionable. There's a lot of exhortation to do more of this and that, but there aren't very many specifics. I know I'm not alone. There's a number of climate and sustainability organizations in Newton that would like to see it amended. Do you have a process for that amendment or a schedule? Because I would definitely like to see it have things that says, like, so for trees, we want to see it included in the stormwater management plan, and there'll be an opportunity to comment here, and we'll talk with DPW, or something like that.
So first of all, we're always open to doing that kind of work. If we do it, and I think we should, it would most likely be led by Sam Nyman and Ann Berwick, who are co-chairs of sustainability. They're the logical people to work on that, probably along with our planners and our DPW people. Because I'll just give you a little bias I have about plans. I think plans are wonderful. Planning is important. And if all you do is spend $50,000 or $100,000 and hours and hours and hours of resident time on a plan, and you stick it on a shelf and no one ever looks at it again, it's a colossal waste of time and money. So to me, plans need to be followed by action items. What are the deliverables that you're going to get when you put your plan together? Now, obviously, plans like a climate action plan are going to have some aspirational goals. And aspirational goals are important. They're targets. What are you going to try to do? But you're 100% right. You can have the aspirational goals, but then what are the immediate deliverables? Short term, medium term, and long term. And you also, as you do that, need to think about the resources it's going to require to get those deliverables in place. And also, what are the trade-offs as you do that kind of work? And virtually everything has trade-offs, okay? If we impose certain requirements, like we have a new all-electric requirement, which I supported for building certain new houses, that's important. That does, at least until the price of installation and electric goes down, could have an additional cost for someone building. Is that a trade-off that we think is worthwhile making? Personally, I think when it comes to environmental stuff, I do think that's a worthwhile trade-off, but that's my point with plans. So the short answer is yes, we are absolutely open to doing that. We'll talk to the sustainability team about the status of it, and I do want our plans to be very clear about what we're actually going to do. Next, over here and then there, go ahead. Yes, sir. Oh, would you like the microphone? Of course. Maybe I'll just give you all the microphone. I'll just talk really loudly.
Thank you. Going back to the topic of the first question. So I'm a parent. I got a 5th grader graduating, ready to go to Brown. I have a 4-year-old in 2 years, elementary school. So you mentioned your #1 priority is education. You're a product of public school systems yourself. Over the last, I've been a Newton resident for 8 years. I've been hearing consistently our school rankings are going down. Specifically, what is your administration going to do about raising the standards, raising the rankings? Thank you.
Okay. So look, you're not going to change things in any organization overnight. One of the things I like so much about Dr. Nolan is she is coming in with a very clear vision for improvement in a number of areas. And I want to be clear, it's not just about test scores. We don't want our kids coming out having checked all the boxes for succeeding academically, but coming out as kids who aren't well-rounded individuals. I mean, again, as someone with now older kids who are products of the schools, I can attest not only are the academics critically important, not only is academic challenge and rigor critically important, but it's the other things that are going on in the school building, whether it's theater or sports or clubs. Any of those activities are also important to create much happier, healthier children. So what am I going to do? Look, the superintendent is the educational leader of the schools. And part of my job, and part of the job of the members of the school committee, is to work with her. She's recommending broad curriculum changes, and we ask the questions, which we should, that's our job. We need to be supportive of that. We need to be supportive in the community about the great things that are going on in our schools. Yes, I understand that we've had some slippage in places. We are in the process of addressing that. And one of the things, again, I really like about the superintendent is not only does she have vision, which is critically important, but she is using real data to measure where we are doing well and where we are not doing well. And I think that's the way to go. It does not mean it's just test your kids. That is not what data is all about. But it's making sure that a concept in 3rd grade, for example, that a child is able to spell, read to a certain level. In 4th grade, that they're able to do maybe multiplication. Again, I'm not the expert here, but knowing that every child by the end of 4th grade can do basic multiplication, and if they're not, that we're providing systems in place to make sure they get there, but that you're measuring that. And that measurement is not an over-dependence on the test. That measurement is to make sure, frankly, that we are holding ourselves as educational leaders accountable. Because if the kids can't do the math, that's not the kids' failure. That's our failure. And we own that. So our job is to do that. And our job is to work with parents. Because anyone who's a parent here knows how important that parental involvement is in making sure there's school success for your kids. So there's a lot of different levers here. I'm not going to suggest we're going to get it done overnight. I will say that as someone who's been a close observer of the schools now for many, many years, notwithstanding concern about where we are in certain rankings, we really do have a superb school system. And I think we need to remember that. Can we do better? Yes, absolutely. Are we going to do better? Yes, absolutely. Okay, next, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, this woman here, forgive me. I'll get you next.
Hi, my name is Candy Seidner. I live on Malmaris Road here in Waban. Waban is, like some other parts of Newton, the land of McMansions. They tear down decent-sized houses and put up bigger ones. There are at least 10 such cases in my neighborhood. You know, and my kids are not going to come back here and live, but other people are. The houses that are big get torn down and even bigger McMansions get built. Is there any recourse the city has other than limiting the size of the property relative, the footprint relative to the size of the whole property?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Then I'll answer it for two people. So look, the question was, what can we do about the seemingly ever-increasing size of houses and the fact that we're seeing, we continue to see a significant number of tear-downs in the city, which take a more modest house and frankly make a much bigger and really less affordable house, even for someone of fairly comfortable means. So look, there's several factors in play here, okay? One is the nature of who all of us, and I say that collectively, all of us are as individuals. The house that might have, with one bathroom, the parents put a half bathroom on the first floor that was sufficient for a family of 5, these days everybody has more of an expectation that there's going to be 2 or 2.5 bathrooms in that house. A kitchen that might have been, as mine was, a rather modest kitchen where there's a little bit of room for a small table, now there's the desire to have much bigger kitchens. So there's a little bit of that going on, and I think, like it or not, that's the way much of our society has gone, and that is reflected in what people want to build. However, we do have the opportunity to limit the size of new properties and at least discourage teardowns. Here's the challenge, and it's one that, as a city council, I struggled with, because the city council, sorry colleagues in the city council, but the city council is ultimately the one through the zoning code, which it is in charge of, determines a lot of these rules. How do you allow people to have private property rights, get the most value for their property, whether it's putting an addition on because your family's growing, or selling to someone for a premium? How do you balance that against the desire not to have these mega houses? And I think the city council, quite frankly, over the years, and I share this, has struggled with that. It is looking at things, for example, like reduce or increasing the size of setbacks. If you increase the size of setbacks, by definition, you constrain what a developer can build there. That's one thing. You look at what's called floor area ratio, which is a measure of how much space you can have in a building compared to the size of the lot, so you have proportionate lots. Those are all tools in the toolbox. Many of them come with cost and other unintended consequences. Are you, for example, going to inadvertently discourage people from, updating their homes, for example? You got to think about that. So I know the city council is working and continue to work very actively on that. One thing we did when I was in the city council I thought was really well done is we prevented developers from, when you look at a house and you measure how high the house can be, it's 36 feet typically. Savvy developers would come in, raise a house, dump 8 feet of fill there, And now the 36-foot house is built on top of 8 feet above that, creating essentially a 44-foot house from what was there previously. I was in Ward 3 during the campaign, and I walked with some neighbors, and I saw a house that had been built like that before we put in the new ordinance, and it was horrible. And it really was unfair to the folks who lived there. So we have done some things to alleviate that, but I'm the first to admit it's not perfect. And again, I know that the city council is actively looking at that. It is an issue. It is a fair issue to consider. We need to do that in a way that is thoughtful, that it's not going to completely discourage anybody from doing anything, but is going to discourage the tear down, the building of the house to, within 5 feet of the setbacks, that frankly almost nobody likes except the developer who's made a fairly large profit on that process. So it's an ongoing effort, and our planning department will work closely with the city council to provide the expertise that the city council needs to make choices. That is going to be, I think, frankly, a little bit of a change in attitude on the planning department, but I am quite comfortable and confident that our planning department is going to work collaboratively with the land use, with the zoning people on the city council zoning and planning committee to effectuate some of those changes. Next, this gentleman here, then there, then Tom, then I'll go over there. Go ahead, sir.
So, I don't need my microphone. Thank you. Great to have you as the mayor, and thanks for doing this. I don't have questions, I just have 2 thoughts for your consideration.
Sure.
The first one, I hope you really like it, because it will raise money instead of costing money.
Usually raising money is good in my world, so let's hear it.
But let's hear it first. I don't know what happened, but ever since COVID, the number of policemen we see the speed traps just seem to have gone away. And what has gone up is distracted driving. Like after 4th time almost getting run over by someone who was doing TikTok while driving, I actually called the police and asked them how many citations they issue. It's less than 1 a day on average. You have to try not to find people who are distracted while they're driving to give less than 1. Please do something about it. I think it's actually it will bring us money. We should kind of find people like me who sometimes exceed the speed limit. It's not cool, but people do it. That's one thing I would consider to do. The second is around schools. Number one, I have to say, we've been in school system. Both my children, my son went through the public schools through this building, or the old building, and now my daughter is a junior at South. We have never been more excited and hopeful as we are now. With Dr. Nolan and with you and the school committee leadership, honestly. I think yesterday what the school committee really kind of like put it in black and white what we always knew, that over time our school quality of particular areas has gone down. We are finally now have planned to go back to where we used to be a few years ago. That will cost money, without question. I think it will cost money. I agree with you that like a override winning is not a slam dunk. Since 2023, we probably will have less students in NPS and more people who are retirees or people who are on fixed income. So, but I would absolutely encourage that just because we may not win an override, my children would be out of schools by then, by the way. Shouldn't prevent us from going if that is the right thing. And the real example I would kind of really draw to you is what SETI Warren did. That SETI went and put together a group of people, I think it was called as Blue Ribbon Commission or something else. Maybe you do that just focused on schools. That how are we compared to our peers, or where should we be, and is our money, how much money do we need, and the government money we have today, is that properly allocated? So I truly encourage you, and if the answer is, you know what, we do need an override, maybe that becomes a business case for a justification for the voters. Or the answer is like, no, we can figure out how to kind of reallocate the money. Then it becomes a justification for the parents to kind of know that you really don't need the money now. So those are the 2 things I would ask.
Great comments, and I want to respond to both of them. First, traffic enforcement. I think traffic enforcement is very important. Why? We don't want people driving distractedly. If we have laws about speeding, we want to enforce them. Here's a problem that we have now. We are down a significant number of officers from where we are supposed to be. In other words, we're supposed to be, I think, 155 or 156 sworn officers. We're down to about 143, and I don't think that includes several who are out on disability type issues. That is a huge problem for us, because if we are down that many officers, we literally do not have the people power to run directed patrols, for example, that's how you typically catch people who are speeding or doing other things. So one of our and our officers are already so strained, working overtime on details and other things, or being called in for overtime, we just don't have the person power to do it. So one of the ways we're going to have to deal with that is we are going to have to be more aggressive in recruiting police officers, something that in this climate is difficult right now. For the last 6 or 7 years, law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies, let me be really clear, I'm not talking about federal, I'm talking about local law enforcement agencies across this region have a very hard time recruiting for an array of reasons. One thing we can do to make coming here better and get better officers, I don't want to be scraping the bottom of the barrel when we recruit. I want somebody who has an opportunity to work in Needham, Wellesley, or Newton to come, and they get an offer in all three places. I want them to come to Newton. So how do we do that? We make sure that they're working, we make sure their salaries are competitive, obviously. We make sure their benefits are competitive, obviously. But two other things that are really important. We give them a physical plant to work in, namely police headquarters, that's state of the art, and not what they have now. And when they go to a neighboring community, they see something very different. So that's piece number one. Piece number two is something that I am going to do, and I hope all my colleagues in elected office and city government do, which is to support our local officers. They know when they're supported and not supported, and I feel very strongly that I, as a mayor, have an obligation to support our officers. That does not mean, to be clear, that you're going to condone bad conduct or anything of that nature. But it does mean that you recognize that policing at the local level is an extraordinarily difficult job. And you appreciate people for their work, whether it's police officers, firefighters, DPW workers, people in your planning department. Your employees appreciate that, and they do a better job. So that's piece number one. The school piece, you know, I think that Dr. Nolan is charting out a very clear path for success. Again, a large part of my job, in addition to finding unlimited amounts of money, which I don't have, there are finite resources, and I think we collectively need to be clear with the public what those resources are. I'm not gonna play games and pull out money at the end of the day and say, guess what, I found $2 million more for the schools. Not gonna work that way in our administration, but we all have to have the same understanding and reasonable expectations about what we can do, and that's a challenge. So I really appreciate the feedback there. Next, Tom.
Thanks. I'm Tom Alkine. I've been a resident of Woburn for over 40 years. And I can tell you something everyone knows, the traffic has not gotten any better during that time. And I don't think it's going to in the future. So one question I have for you is, what are you thinking about in terms of new approaches to reduce car travel in Newton, either through creating better bike infrastructure or better public transportation options, maybe north-south? The other thing with regard to your police shortages, I have to say that my son for a long time was an auxiliary police officer. That position disappeared several years ago. From my understanding, it could be reinstituted. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So let me Let me deal with auxiliary police first and then turn to traffic. Newton for many years had what was called an auxiliary police department. Individuals who served in kind of roles that were traffic guidance, for example, at large events, or other auxiliary roles that are not required to have a gun and a badge, but are very important to what they do. In the wake of the Post Commission, which is the Police Officer Standards Commission, set up at the state level, I think around 2021 in the wake of the George Floyd murder. That made it more difficult to have an auxiliary police department. And so our auxiliary police department was disbanded. I actually think it is very much worth exploring. I've had a lot of communications with Jeff Silton, who formerly helped run that group. I think they can perform important duties, but we need to be very careful that in doing that, we don't want to foul of the new and I think quite appropriate standards from the state to make sure that folks who are dressed in something that looks like law enforcement are both properly trained and the appropriate people. There are ways we can look at it. It might be a different colored uniform. It might be something that made it quite clear that they did not have arrest authority, for example, like a sworn officer does. It's something that we are going to look at. Traffic. In addition, besides potholes, traffic may be the single biggest thing I hear about all over the city. So I think there's a bunch of things that we can do about it. And frankly, there's some things that I think are going to be much harder to do. Some things that we can do are just do a better job of paving our roads. And by roads, I include bike lanes. So if you are a cyclist and the road is smooth and you can cycle without hitting a pothole, you're more likely to get on your bike to take that short trip from point A to point B. That's piece number one. Number two, we can and must do a better job of synchronizing traffic signals all across the city. I've been communicating with our city engineer about the intersection at Center Street and Walnut, and then the one under Route 9 there. Anybody who's driven there has sat through 5 cycles when the signals are not turning properly, including yours truly, which now that I'm the mayor, I actually get to write to someone and say, why the heck is this going on and when is it going to be fixed? Of course, like many other things, as I learned, it is not as simple as the mayor waking up one morning and saying, get it done. The section under Route 9 is state property. You got to deal with the state DOT. You got to work with state DOT to work with our signalization people. You actually got to do a lot to coordinate a whole bunch of different things. But, Tom, that is no excuse for not getting it done. So I do think that's a little thing, but that's the type of thing that helps with traffic flow. Other pieces are more difficult. An intra-city transportation system tried a bunch of years ago, didn't work very well. We tried Numo for a while. That's great if you have an extra $1 million sitting around that you can subsidize it with. And of course, unintended consequence, we end up subsidizing a lot of kids who are going to our high schools, particularly at Newton South. They can go to Newton Center for lunch. Mind you, I'm fine with kids going to Newton Center for lunch, but I don't think our tax dollars should be used to subsidize that. So that is something we're going to continue to look at. I will say this, I think, you know, the wave of the future is probably things like autonomous vehicles. I'm no expert in that, but I fully expect they're going to be here sooner than later. That will change how we get around, including changing patterns, frankly, of car ownership, too, over time. I don't know how quickly that's going to be here, but that will be there. We are also going to look at any and all other things that we can do to help traffic move along. It is a problem, and I wish I had a cure for it completely, and I don't. But I hope that helps. This gentleman over here, and then I'm going to work around the room.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ben Haywood, I went to Cabot Day in North, and my kids are at Angier, Brown, and South. So
Awesome. But you're much younger than I am.
yeah, well, more generic question. Most of my friends and neighbors aren't here, and I'm wondering how you, to use a loaded term, think about the silent majority who's not sort of coming with the squeaky wheel. And I'm not characterizing that, but how do you get the input from the vast majority of people who are not activists? Just curious, process-wise for you.
You know, that is an absolutely superb question. How do we get feedback from folks who don't come out to these types of meetings, who are not part of advocacy groups? I've been thinking about that for 20 plus years in government. Because while I think advocacy groups are very important, I do not want to downplay their importance. They play a critical role in raising issues to the forefront. They're the folks who often roll up their sleeves and do the hard work of coming up with a climate action plan and other things. And they push us to do things in a very good way. But the risk of city government is you can't let the advocacy groups drive every decision without understanding what the vast majority of residents, I hate to use the word silent majority, that has some pretty bad connotations politically, for those of you old enough to remember that. But I do think it is true. So what are we doing? We are out there putting our newsletter out to people. We have 31,000 emails in the newsletter, which is a very significant number. But we're going to do more than that. We're going to be out more on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Facebook, you know, if you look at Instagram, for example, or Twitter, particularly Instagram, the demographics as to who uses those vehicles of communication are important. Look, I will come to as many of these as I can. I will go to temples and churches and any other religious organization. I'll come to and I have and will continue to go to PTO meetings. I'll go to senior centers. I'll go anywhere where residents are gathered to get their feedback and get their opinions. And it's not just me, but my team is going to do that as well. So that's one way we'll do that. We have office hours. We're trying multiple different channels. One way you can measure opinion is through surveys. I will say this about surveys. If done properly, and I mean scientifically, they can give you very valuable feedback. I mean, that's what pollsters do in political campaigns all the time. However, surveys that just ask for people's feedback without any effort to figure out who's actually responding to the survey, actually, I think, can be a very poor and frankly misleading way of gaining information. Why? Because whatever your side is on any particular issue, you organize all the folks who agree with you to fill out the survey. And you see that in school surveys, you see that in city surveys, and now you've got 1,000 responses. What you don't know is that 750 of them were from because a particular advocacy group. And I want to be clear, I'm talking about advocacy groups across the political spectrum. This is not meant to be liberal or conservative or pro or anti anything, but generally, that's a challenge. So it's hard to do those kind of opinion surveys, are expensive. But I think there's other means, and I will remain completely open to any and all suggestions that people have. And again, we are going to where people are. That's the best way to get people involved. I can't get everybody involved. I wish I could. I wish I could clone all of you and have you as the standard resident because you took enough time to be here this evening. And that says a lot. That means you care. All right? But again, at some point, you just have to do the best you can and understand that some people, frankly, are, I don't want to use the word apathetic, but are less interested in what local government does, and so therefore will not come out and get involved. All right, yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Rick Burns, and I have 2 kids in Angier in 2nd and 4th grade right now. So another question about the schools. First, I just want to echo what this gentleman here said. I mean, just about the excitement. Dr. Nolan was here in this room a couple months ago, having a coffee with parents, and it's just, there's a lot of excitement about her vision and what she wants to do. And I guess the question for you is, what's on your list over the next couple of months to sort of help her start to get down that road? I mean, all of the things you've been talking about, just the prioritization of schools and the sort of your focus on the schools is fantastic, and I'm just wondering what's next. You know, what are you doing the next, and also longer term strategy. I think you sort of alluded to that with getting to an override, but I'm just curious about drilling in a little bit more into the plan.
So I think the single most important thing I'm going to be doing right now is working with the school committee leadership, the school committee, and Superintendent Nolan on the budget. All right, that, because at the end of the day, money is a driver for much, not all, but much of what we do. And I'll be candid, we are seeing some really clear escalating costs. Utilities, health insurance are two very significant drivers, not only on the city side, but on the school side, but because the school side is the majority of our city employees, most of our buildings is a bigger driver for them. That's a cause of real concern. And as I said earlier, while we are doing work to free up more money in the budget for the schools, it's not, I can tell you right now, it's not going to be everything I wish I could do, period. And so what we're going to have to do, working with the superintendent and her team, is understanding what her priorities are. Where do we put the money now where it's going to make the biggest bang, not only this year, but setting the stage for future years? Because I think a lot of the superintendent's work is designed to look out, not just what we're doing now, but to look out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years to set us on a pathway to sustained success. So that's piece number one. Piece number two, I've been doing this and I'm going to continue to do this. I am going to be an advocate for our public schools. And I'm going to be out there with my school committee colleagues, because I get to sit in the school committee again. Honestly, it's a little bit more interesting than the city council was. No offense, colleagues. But I really do like it. And even though I sat through a 2-hour math presentation last night, which was probably a bit above my pay grade, it was actually very exciting to see the thought processes that have gone on to revitalizing and thinking about our math curriculum, which I think by all accounts has not been where it should have been for a number of years. So I'll be working really closely as an advocate, and I'll be really working as an active member of the school committee, participating in school committee discussions and deliberations as one of 9 voting members.
Mayor, we're going to do 2 more questions. So.
All right. You've been patient. How are you?
Good.
I'm Kathy Pillsbury. I think I follow up somewhat on what was said about the climate action plan, because it's right in the middle of, actually the department, I think, thinks it's already all out, but it clearly needs a lot more work on priorities and deliverables, as we talked about. And I think I'd like to see more involvement and more planning done to make sure that it really is effective. So it needs more work on it.
Thank you, Kathy. I think that's a very fair observation. And as I said earlier, and I'll reiterate, plans are great. Plans are worthless if you don't act. So the key is to act, and the key is also that we need to have a combination of aspiration and what we actually can get done. Again, I will invite you to work with our team to help craft that. I think that's going to be very valuable input. So I'm going to go.
Now I'm a softie.
All right.
All right.
You're
We already
the
did one here. We'll do here, here, and here.
All
3
right.
more. That's it.
Okay. It's great to have a chief of staff.
Hi, thanks again for coming tonight.
Of course.
Thinking about the climate politically, nationally, I'm wondering what we can do, if there's anything that's being done to protect Newton from potentially ice coming here.
So the question was about what we can do to protect Newton if ICE comes to the city. So let me start off with where I stand. Anybody who heard what I said on my inaugural address when I spoke in the Newton Center Green about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when I spoke at Martin Luther King Day celebration, will, I hope, came away with the clear, unequivocal understanding that I believe in democracy, I believe in the rule of law, I believe that this is a welcoming city, and we are going to continue to abide by those principles. And while I often said on the campaign trail, I'm not going to get involved in setting foreign policy, I have lots of opinions on Greenland and Ukraine, that's probably not germane to what we do in the city of Newton, but what ICE might do if it comes here is germane to the residents of Newton, and I will be speaking out and continue to speak out forcefully and clearly as to what our moral obligation is in doing the right thing. So what are we actively doing? I am working with mayors in the greater Boston area as we speak to make sure we are coordinating our actions. We signed on to an amicus brief that was filed in federal district court in Minneapolis about a week and a half ago, a brief that was drafted by the city of Boston that we read and we said this is the right thing for the city of Newton to stand by. These are the things we're going to do. We're going to continue to do that kind of work. I fully intend to stand with other mayors in the region in making sure that we take appropriate, legal, peaceful actions within the realm of what our authority is. I just have to add a plug here because I feel so strongly about this. I cannot emphasize enough that our Newton Police Department is completely and totally different than ICE and the ICE enforcement agents. Our police department is here to protect us. Our police department is here to make sure that we're not running red lights, to be there in time of need, to help someone who's a victim of a domestic assault. That's what our police department does, and does very well day in and day out. And our officers are trained. They are highly trained. They understand that when we perform law enforcement here in the city of Newton, our officers are identifiable with a badge, a name, and they don't wear a mask, because that's how we do things in Newton. So I just urge people, as we are dealing with what's going on elsewhere in the country, and hopefully doesn't come here to Newton, that we remember that our police officers are not ICE, and our police officers have very different standards, very different training, and very different responsibilities. Okay, yes? Go ahead.
So I've lived in Newton for 48 years, and, you know, and when I came here, you know, I moved into a starter home. There are very few starter homes left in Newton, and as you said, when there is one, it gets knocked down and a McMansion gets built in its place. And on my street and the streets around it, I can't tell you how many big homes have been built, and how many of my neighbors' homes, when they have moved out, have been knocked down. I know that there are, in fact, low-income, housing, has been planned, but that's different than a starter home for families who want to move to Newton. And I think that that is becoming very, very difficult. And families who want to move to Newton or move to the suburbs, you really have to move further and further west or south or wherever. And I think that that's something which I know is very difficult. And I could not afford, I don't think, to live in Newton anymore if I didn't own my home. And I think that for people of in fact, my generation, it's very difficult. And I know you are talking about, overrise, and I support the schools. And my kids went to Angier. They went to the old Angier. But, you know, I think for my generation, it is very difficult to hear about, in fact, you know, overrides, and I do support the schools. But it really feels like I'm being pulled in many different directions. And I really feel that it is a difficult position for the older generation that does not want to move out of Newton. I don't want to leave Newton. I love Newton. I raised my kids here. And I really don't have an answer. And I don't know if you have an answer or not.
Well, I have answers to some things, but not all. Look, we face increasing prices, not just here in Newton, but all over the greater Boston area. And there's multiple reasons for that, but one is pure geography, okay? Unlike other cities where Boston's a coastal city, literally 40 or 50% of Boston's boundaries, if you look east, it's water. You can't build on water. So that means that your land is constrained to the west. Other factors way beyond Newton's control are, frankly, our public transit system, particularly our commuter rail system, is woefully inadequate. And that's a long-standing problem. If you had better rail service to a Worcester or a Springfield, by definition, you take some of the pressures off a place like Newton, and that would alleviate things. There are other factors in play. I'll be honest, we can try to build, we can certainly build affordable housing in the city. We have an inclusionary zoning ordinance that requires developers to put a certain amount aside. We do have some purely affordable units. That's not what you're talking about. And I think it's extraordinarily difficult, even if we tear, and here's the problem, we tear down an existing single-family home that may be rather modest, and we put up a duplex, side-by-side duplex there instead. Those duplexes probably are going to sell often for more than the price of the original single-family home. Why? The developer is making a profit. The developer believes that he or she can build something with all the bells and whistles, even if it's part of a duplex rather than a single-family home, and so you're not getting that affordable unit. Again, we do have some controls in place, the setback controls, the FAR controls, other things that will probably slow some of that down, but I don't have a panacea for it, unfortunately, but it's a fair point. And there's a lot of different levers, some at the local level, many more at the state level.
Final question, right here.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm one of the non-school parents, sort of the people that you said, the majority of the people here. And my question is, it's a money question, but it's also sort of a pet project question. And that it seemed in the prior administration, a lot of things happened from the top down. An example, the plaza in Newton Center. These individual village redevelopment projects. And then the big one, the whole rezoning fiasco. It seemed like all of those involved hiring consultants. And it really bugged me, the amount of money that was spent on consultants for projects that most people in the city really didn't have an interest in seeing accomplished. So my question is, what is your feeling about consultants, whether they will be continued to be hired and used as much as they were in the past, and maybe use some of the brains and experience of Newton residents in forming committees or whatever, and accomplishing similar kind of goals, and do more of a grassroots motivation rather than a top-down.
So I can tell you, as someone who spent a long time in the private sector, providing services to folks, including governmental entities at times, there's nothing better than being a consultant if you want to get paid for your work. So I do appreciate the role they play. But in all seriousness, one of the things I have been demanding of all our department heads that use outside contractors or consultants or lawyers or other similar service providers is to very carefully scrutinize their contracts, scrutinize their bills, and make sure that whatever we're contracting for, we're getting value for our dollar. I'm not suggesting that people are cheating us or anything like that. I don't want to leave you with that impression. But every client, in this case the city as a client, needs to work very carefully with their service providers to make sure they're getting the maximum value, that they're not sending 3 people to a meeting where one could do, and then charging you for the 3 people attending that same meeting. That's piece number 1. Piece number 2 is consultants actually do have an important role to play. Our city, at times, in certain areas, simply does not have the depth of expertise, nor would we want to bring on someone on a full-time basis with that expertise to do certain things. I'll give you an example. If our law department is enmeshed in a case in bankruptcy court, our law department's not equipped to litigate in bankruptcy court. Far better to go out and hire a bankruptcy lawyer for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to handle that matter than to bring on a bankruptcy lawyer on the city payroll, pay that person's salary and benefits. You do the cost benefit thing. That's really true with some of the planning issues as well. There are certain areas of expertise, traffic studies, for example, where you really do need the expertise of people who have modeling tools, who have been working with cities and towns across the Commonwealth, who can bring that experience to the project that we have in Newton. With that said, we are not going to have a top-down process in my administration. We're going to have lots of ideas, and many of them will be generated by people like you in this room. We're going to vet them internally first to make sure they have some feasibility or viability, and then we're going to go out and talk to our residents, not with, here's what we are going to do, but rather, this is what we're thinking of. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This is a possible solution. And then get input from a variety of sources. And that is, in my mind, a very different way of functioning than we have done in more recent years. And I hope it's better. It goes back to the comment about Fuller Street, for example, where if we had talked to the residents on day 1, I think we still would have probably done some improvements there. But we would have done a much better job. And so that's something we're determined to do, and we're taking that across the city as we roll out new projects. So I think, Dana, I'm done. Thank you all so much. Look, I'll come back, okay? Dana's going to schedule me whenever, and Jacqueline will schedule me whenever I'm supposed to be there, I will. But look, my door is always open at City Hall, okay? You can come in. You probably got to talk to Jacqueline first before you just march in. But seriously, I want you to do that. I want you to email me. I read my emails. Those of you who've emailed me know I try to respond to my emails very, very quickly because that's customer service. And if I can't respond, Dana's favorite email or John's favorite email is, it's Mark, it's like, 10 at night, and there's 2 words, please handle. Because I know that they are then going to respond to the constituent and be able to give informed information to try to resolve whatever concern or problem you have. So we work for you. I hope you'll constantly remember that. We're constantly going to try to do better. We're not perfect. We are going to make mistakes. I hope we learn from them. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.